11, part 4. Um, so this is essentially Act 1 of the movie, which is before they leave to go to the sort of Summerside, the doctor's house. By the way, the medical shit in this movie is insane because like it's like a fancy she goes to a woman stops speaking, and so they send her to like the mental ward where she gets a nurse to take care of her, and then the doctor's like, you know what would help you to feel better? I'm gonna send you to my cabin out on the on the water where you can relax and have a good time at my Airbnb house or whatever. Like I don't know. Is this how rich people behave? I have no idea. Anyway, the two women, Alma and that's when the doctor drops out, and then for the rest of the movie, it's really basically just Alma and Vogler. One of the first things that happens out there is the women. She doesn't speak. Vogler doesn't speak, but she hums, and the two women hum together and they harmonize. They're working together. There's a sound and there's a harmonizing. It's just that their voices melded. Their voices unify but crisscrossing each other. That's what's going to happen for the rest of the film. Is this idea of harmony, which is when two voices become one. And that is a key. I feel like this is a rude gesture in England. I apologize. But that's a key thing that humming, I think, is a really important bit. Also, hilariously, I love that Alma's beachside reading is like fucking intense, depressing religious philosophy, right? She doesn't have like a magazine or like a fun book about, housewives murdering each other. She's got like fucking Kierkegaard philosophy shit. But the book that she's reading is about that the pain and anxiety makes us wish for otherworldly salvation, right? That there's so much pain in the world that we expect God to save us. But that wish is itself proof that God has abandoned us. Like, holy shit, that's a real intense beach reading. Yeah. By the way, when people think about movies as like art, this is the movie they're thinking of. This is if you want one movie to argue that a movie is fundamentally like a poem, this is it. Okay, so again, this is a movie about big philosophical questions, the nature of the universe and identity and who will save us, right? So we expect, this is the whole point of superhero movies, by the way, is that we're hoping someone else, we don't want to save ourselves, we expect someone to come in and save us, some superhero or Jesus or whatever is going to swoop down from the sky and save us from our problems. But of course, Alma's book suggests that God has abandoned everybody. It's a dark movie. I like dark movies. Alma movies I like are fucking dark. Okay, the women start to dress a little bit alike. They start to they sort of smoke, and they don't look a ton like each other, but you start to see them kind of mimicking each other. Please notice that one of Vogler's jobs as an actress is to mimic. The whole point of acting is to, well, if it's based off a real person, you're mimicking someone else. And so actors oftentimes they create a character by copying somebody they know in real life or that they've studied, for example. Okay, cool. They start to dress alike and smoke alike. Okay. All right, here we go. Let's get into some of the more intense shit. Psychoanalysis, therapy. Psychoanalysis is, the idea of psychoanalysis is that if someone is, sometimes Freud kind of invented psychoanalysis, and his idea, it was an interesting idea. People make fun of it now because it's not really science. And he said it was science, and he's wrong. It's not science, and so a lot of people, like my wife, for example, just think he's an idiot. But it's a kind of mythology. It's not supposed to be, but it's superego and the id and all these psychology ideas. Freud had this idea that a lot of people suffer. Everybody, Freud said, suffers some degree of mental trauma. They're all carrying around a certain amount of psychic pain, and sometimes if you bottle the pain up, it can cause problems in everyday life. His examples were things like stuttering or obsessive compulsive disorder, or different kinds of extreme anxiety, phobias, that kind of thing. Where people go, I don't understand why you're acting like that. Well, it's because they're bottling up pain or anxiety or something, and they have to kind of release it in some way. And so Freud had this idea that talking would help to cure people. And so his idea of therapy was the patient comes in, and the therapist asks questions, and the patient talks. And through talking, the therapist guides the patient through talking to kind of figure out what's going on in here. Because if you can kind of think about what's going on in here and in here, just getting the words out and bouncing them off somebody else is a way of, it's like a pressure valve gets released, and you can kind of get a better degree of health, psychic health. I say this. This is an important thing to realize. So when you think about a psychoanalyst with a patient, like a therapist with a patient, the patient's doing most of the talking. And the psychoanalyst's job is to listen and to kind of guide the patient um, to realize like why they're in so much pain. That's why the joke of psychoanalysis is like, tell me about your mother, because we're going to go back to like the roots. Because Freud's idea was that trauma from childhood, sort of small painful incidents from childhood, shape who you are now in a way that most people cannot escape, and nobody can escape. Freud's real dark too. I like dark. Um, so I mention all of this because I want you to notice how bonkers the relationship between Alma and Vogler is. Um, Alma is supposed to be helping Vogler get better. But what actually happens is that because Vogler is so quiet, she doesn't ever speak. Alma speaks. And Alma just speaks and speaks and speaks and speaks and speaks, and she will not shut up. It's exciting for Alma. Alma actually says, like, I've never had anybody listen to me. Like, you're the first person that's ever listened to me before. So in some ways, this is like the reverse of psychoanalysis. It's the doctor, the nurse, that's doing all the talking, and the patient just listens and listens and listens. But Alma, I'm sure you've had this experience before, where like Alma says she grew up with, I mean, I forget the number, but like 8 brothers or something, or 7 brothers, but nobody ever listened to her. People just ignored her. And and you know how hard it is to get somebody to actually listen to you, especially when you have problems. Maybe again, intimacy. Some of your mom, maybe your best friend, maybe, but people are in a lot of pain themselves and don't have a lot of space for your pain. It's hard to get somebody to really listen without interrupting, without bothering you, without asking for things in return. And also, it's hard to get people to really hear you, right? Because they're on their phone, or they're watching TV, and they're not playing video games. They don't really listen. But the situation that Alma's in means she's with somebody who has to be a good listener, because she doesn't ever speak, and if they don't have the internet. They don't have a lot of distractions out there, and so Alma's in a position where she could talk and talk and talk and be listened to. Um, and this is a kind of complete revelation for her. She's able to really open up in this way, and it's intimacy. The other thing about silence, and I'll tell you this as a teacher, I know this for sure. The thing about silence is people fucking hate silence. They fucking hate it. When students, for example, cheat on papers, I get plagiarized papers. Sometimes I'll get them in my office to talk to them about why they cheated, and I'll say, "Why did you cheat?" And they don't, and they kind of give me these rambly, and they sort of try to explain themselves, but not really. And oftentimes I'll just ask them a question, and I'll just sit there and wait for them to answer. And sometimes they won't answer me. Well, like this as students, a lot of times, if you don't say anything, if the teacher asks a question, right? If you don't say anything, eventually the teacher will answer his own question. Most of my students have learned this little trick. If you just shut up long enough, the teacher asks you asks you a question, but the teacher will ultimately get impatient and just answer the question themselves. Most teachers don't have the patience to ask a question and just sit there and let the whole class think about it until somebody fucking says something. They won't do it. Because silence makes people uncomfortable. Because when there is silence, people want to fill that silence with something, a movie, talking, music. Silence makes people real uncomfortable. That's what's happening with Alma. The silence is a lot. To be in a house with one, you're only around one person and they don't speak. So Alma feels compelled to fill the silence. And what does she fill it with? Her deepest, darkest secrets. All right, I'll see you in the next video.